The story begins with a billionaire named Pharaoh Olivetti, who is a successful businessman from California and also a playboy. Pharaoh is known for his wealth and handsome looks, which attract women. However, he is more interested in the beautiful wives of rich people rather than single women. Pharaoh values his independence and avoids the complications of relationships. Pharaoh is very serious about his business. Many times, competitors try to take over his company, but he always manages to stay one step ahead. One evening, while hosting a party at his luxurious bungalow and about to start a romance with a beautiful woman, he receives an emotional call from his mother in Italy. She is crying and informs him that his father is critically ill and wants to see him in his final moments. Touched by her words, Pharaoh decides to leave for Italy immediately. Pharaoh has a deep bond with his father, coming from a modest Italian family. Pharaoh moved to California to study business. Through hard work and dedication, he built a massive business empire. His father was proud of his success but always emphasized that without humanity and true love, success is meaningless. When Pharaoh arrives at his father's home, his mother tells him that his father has only a few hours left. Overwhelmed with emotion, Pharaoh goes in to see his father. The sight of each other brings both of them to tears. Despite being big, his father conveys his final wish that Pharaoh should take a 30-day break from his business and go to a place where no one knows him. During this time, he must not use any money or his name. Confused by this unusual request, Pharaoh asks why his father wants him to do this. His father takes his hand and says, "Don't ask questions this time. Just promise me you will honor my last wish." It is a difficult decision, especially with one of his competitors actively trying to take over his company. Pharaoh agrees, willing to risk his business to fulfill his father's dying wish. Shortly after, Pharaoh's father passes away. Following the funeral, Pharaoh returns to California and entrusts his assistant Lawrence with managing the company. He avoids asking Lawrence too many questions and simply says, "You will handle it." Next, Pharaoh takes the ID of his driver, Claude, and boards a regular commercial flight to New York. Pharaoh arrives in New York determined to fulfill his father's wish. Having brought no money with him, he hitchhikes from the airport to the city. His first challenge is to find a job. After wandering around and applying at small shops throughout the day, he has no luck. Exhausted and discouraged, he ends up in a bar that evening. At the bar, a woman takes an interest in Pharaoh and starts a conversation. When she asks what he does and where he lives, Pharaoh avoids answering directly, which annoys her, and she leaves. Observing this, another woman named Peta approaches him and offers to take him to her flat. At her flat, Pharaoh meets Peta's friend, who is already asleep. Peter brings Pharaoh to her room and tries to seduce him. To avoid her advances, Pharaoh pretends to be gay and attempts to sleep, snoring. However, Peter's loud snoring forces Pharaoh to move to another room. Unfortunately, he startles the sleeping woman there, who throws him out of the flat in the middle of the night and angrily scolds Peter for bringing a stranger home. Now homeless and wandering the streets at night, Pharaoh is attacked by two pickpockets who try to steal his bag. Defending himself, he breaks the nose of one of them and flees. Seeking refuge, he hides on the balcony of a house, mistaking him for a thief. The landlord calls the police and Pharaoh spends his first night in police custody, where he endures harassment from a deranged inmate. In the morning, the police release Pharaoh after confirming his story about escaping from pickpockets. Starving and desperate, he finds 50 cents at the police station and goes to a nearby shop. He offers the 50 cents and a packet of branded condoms in exchange for food, but the shopkeeper dismisses it as a joke. Weak and hungry, Pharaoh collapses onto a park bench. By midday, his hunger becomes unbearable. Spotting a hot dog vendor, he approaches and says, "I only have 50 cents. Can I get something for that much?" The vendor, a kind-hearted man named Angelo, sympathizes with Pharaoh's condition and gives him a hot dog for free. When Pharaoh tries to pay, Angelo smiles and refuses, saying it's on him. Deeply grateful, Pharaoh thanks Angelo repeatedly before leaving. After satisfying his hunger, Pharaoh picks up a newspaper near a trash bin and starts searching for job opportunities. As he reads, a mini truck lightly bumps into him, causing him to fall to the ground. The driver quickly gets out, apologizes profusely, and introduces himself as Fred. Insisting on making it up to Pharaoh, Fred offers him a ride and some help. Pharaoh explains that he is looking for work. Hearing this, Fred takes him to one of his customers who happens need a personal driver. Pharaoh arrives at the customer's house and attends an interview. The customer, Mr. Curtis, begins questioning him. Pharaoh introduces himself as Claude, the name on the driver's ID he borrowed. Mr. Curtis decides to hire him and tells him to start the following day. However, Curtis' young wife, Kate, is immediately drawn to Pharaoh's good looks and insists he start working that night. As they need a waiter for a party, Pharaoh, having no other accommodations, agrees right away. That night, Pharaoh works as a waiter at the party, where he struggles to deal with some unruly, intoxicated guest. Meanwhile, Kate lingers close to Pharaoh throughout the event, showing clear interest in him. During the party, Pharaoh catches a news report on TV announcing that his company, Olivetti Enterprises, has secured a major project, defeating its competitor. This news makes Pharaoh immensely happy. Later, while dropping off a drunk party guest at their home, Pharaoh calls his assistant Lawrence, congratulates Lawrence, and instructs him to distribute a $5,000 bonus to all employees. Lawrence is taken aback, as Pharaoh was never known for such generosity toward his staff. However, the hardships Pharaoh has faced while living as a common man have started to change his perspective. When Pharaoh returns to his room, he finds Kate already waiting for him. Before he can react, there is a knock at the door. Panicking, Pharaoh quickly hides Kate under the bed and opens the door. At the door is Curtis' daughter Nancy, who is visibly intoxicated. Shortly afterward, there is another knock. This time, Pharaoh hides Nancy in the bathroom before answering. Now it's Mr. Curtis at the door. During their conversation, Pharaoh learns that Curtis is bisexual and has ulterior motives towards him. Thinking quickly, Pharaoh lies, claiming he has a contagious disease that spreads through close contact. Alarmed, Curtis quickly leaves. After Curtis departs, Nancy emerges from the bathroom and attempts to seduce Pharaoh. He gently explains that she is too young, but Nancy offers him money to try to sway him. When Pharaoh firmly declines, she storms off angrily. And finally, Kate then calls out from under the bed. Pharaoh doesn't send her away, as his attraction to married women aligns with his playboy tendencies. What transpires between them becomes another chapter in his carefree lifestyle. The following day, Pharaoh drives Curtis to his office. Curtis, feeling embarrassed, pleads with Pharaoh to keep the previous night a secret. Smirking, Pharaoh feigns ignorance, saying he has no idea what Curtis is talking about. The relieved Curtis lets the matter drop. At Curtis' office, Pharaoh is surprised to see Dinah, the same woman who had thrown him out of Peter's flat. Dinah now works as a real estate agent at Curtis' firm. Pharaoh attempts to speak with her, but she coldly ignores him and busies herself with work. Other employees and Dinah's friends gush over Pharaoh's looks, teasing Dinah that anyone else wouldn't have turned him away. 3 days later, Dinah arrives at the office to find a bouquet of flowers on her desk. With no name on the card, she is left guessing who sent them. At that moment, Curtis calls Dinah, asking her to bring his forgotten briefcase to his house. Dinah hesitates, explaining she has a funeral to attend that afternoon. But Curtis assures her the driver will drop her off afterward. When Dinah arrives at Curtis' house with the briefcase, she is startled to see Pharaoh there. At Curtis' request, Pharaoh drives Dinah to the funeral. On the way, he apologizes for the incident at Peter's flat and asks if she liked the flowers. Dinah remains reserved but acknowledges the gesture. During the funeral, the priest develops a code leading to several humorous moments that make it hard for Pharaoh and Dinah to surpass their laughter. After the service, Pharaoh invites Dinah for coffee. During their conversation, she asks if he is married. Pharaoh candidly replies that he values his freedom and fun too much to settle down. Dinah becomes upset upon hearing Pharaoh's response and says she is not the type of woman he thinks she is. Pharaoh stops her and apologizes. He then says, "Come on, tell me something about yourself." Diana, noticing Pharaoh's gentlemanly tone, feels comfortable and begins to share. Diana explains that her husband was killed in the Iraq War after 9 years of marriage, and since then she has been living with her parents. Although her parents encourage her to start dating again, she hasn't yet recovered from the trauma of losing her husband. Pharaoh feels deeply sorry for Diana and gently advises her to move on and start living life again. Diana laughs at Pharaoh's remark. Their conversation becomes so engaging that they don't even realize that they have been talking for 3 hours. On the way home, they continue to chat, and Diana feels that Pharaoh is the first person she has truly opened up to in a long time. Diana gradually begins to feel attracted to Pharaoh. When he drops her off at her house, she looks into his eyes and kisses him. Pharaoh then asks her out on a date for the following Tuesday, and Diana happily agrees before heading inside. Her parents, noticing her uplifted mood, are pleased to see her taking an interest in someone after such a long time. However, their happiness is short-lived when they learn that Pharaoh is merely a driver. Diana reassures them that Pharaoh isn't someone she is considering for a serious relationship, so there is no need to worry. She also clarifies that marriage is not on her mind. Tuesday arrives, but Mr. Curtis assigns Diana an additional project, requiring her to travel across town. Pharaoh doesn't mind and decides to accompany her to help with the work. At the end of the day, Diana apologizes for not giving him time on their date. Pharaoh responds, "You said yes to the date, that's enough for me." Impressed by his understanding, Diana spends time with him afterward. A few days later, while Pharaoh is standing outside the office, Nancy, Curtis' daughter, approaches him with an angry glare. Shortly after, Pharaoh is called into Curtis' office, where Curtis bravely accusing him of misbehaving with Nancy. Pharaoh silently endorses the false accusation, but Diana can't tolerate the injustice. She angrily curses at Curtis and storms out of the office with Pharaoh. On the way, Pharaoh tells Diana about the strange behavior of Curtis and his family, which makes Diana laugh. That evening, Diana invites Pharaoh to her house for dinner. However, her parents are upset to learn that Pharaoh has lost his job and are also concerned about the growing closeness between him and Diana. Pharaoh eases their worries by mentioning that he will soon be returning to California. Hearing this, Diana's parents feel somewhat relieved. During their conversation, Diana reveals she has saved money and plans to open her own real estate agency. She surprises Pharaoh by asking him to be her business partner. Touched by her trust and confidence in him, Pharaoh agrees to help. Drawing on his experience, Pharaoh creates a strong business plan for the agency. He recruits 3 of Curtis' employees, who are also Diana's friends, by offering them a 15% profit share each. Diana thanks Pharaoh for his efforts, and the two celebrate the launch of the new agency by dancing together. During the celebration, Diana says, "I think I am falling in love with you." Pharaoh brushes off her comment with a smile, suggesting she might be speaking under the influence of alcohol. Still, he admits that he has never met anyone like her before. The new agency earns a profit of $12,000 in its first 2 weeks, leaving Diana thrilled with their success. However, Pharaoh begins to think about his return to California. He tells Diana he needs to leave soon, which saddens her. She wistfully says, "I wish you had opened your own agency in California." Pharaoh doesn't respond and falls into deep thought. By then, he has spent 23 days in New York. One day, he receives a call from his assistant Lawrence, who informs him that a competitor has taken advantage of his absence and made a serious attempt to seize control of his company. And then Lawrence warns Pharaoh that if he doesn't appear before the judge in business court the following Monday, he will lose the company. Worried, Pharaoh reassures Lawrence that he will handle the situation and ends the call. Before he leaves, Diana gives him a tie as a keepsake. The two then go to watch a fighter jet display. While watching the show, Diana confesses again, saying, "The thought of you leaving scares me." Pharaoh replies, "If I told you everything about me, you did probably never want me to stay." Confused by his response, Diana expresses her love, saying, "I love you." Pharaoh looks into her eyes, hugs her tightly, but still doesn't say the words back. Pharaoh completes his 29 days in New York. The judge's decision in the California Business Court was set to be announced on Monday. Lawrence, present in court, and it seemed as though the judge was about to rule against Pharaoh's company. Then suddenly Pharaoh arrived. The judge immediately delivered the verdict in Pharaoh's favor. The case hinged on Pharaoh's physical presence, and he ensured he was there by flying to California in time on his private jet. After securing the win, Pharaoh quickly returned to New York to see Diana. When she asked where he had been all day, Pharaoh replied, "Trust me, I will explain everything when the time is right." And now Diana accepted his response, but their conversation was interrupted when Curtis' wife Kate arrived. She hugged Pharaoh and insistently asked him to come with her. Diana, seeing this, grew furious. She left the office and ran home, refusing to answer Pharaoh's calls despite his efforts to stop her. The next day, Pharaoh returned to California. When Diana discovered he had left without saying goodbye, she felt heartbroken. Several days later, truck driver Fred visited the Curtis house and revealed a shocking truth. He informed Curtis that the so-called driver working for them was actually Pharaoh Olivetti, a billionaire. Fred even showed a $50,000 check Pharaoh had sent him. Curtis and his daughter Nancy were left speechless. Meanwhile, in California, Pharaoh spoke to his mother about everything that had happened. He shared how his father's last wish had taught him so much about life. "It's because of him that I met a woman who is truly different from anyone else," Pharaoh said, "but I feel like I have lost her." Pharaoh's mother encouraged him not to give up. "Go and talk to her," she urged. Taking her advice, Pharaoh decided to return to New York. He took a taxi straight to Diana's house. Although Diana's mother initially tried to stop him, Diana came to the door and learned that her mother had hidden the news of Pharaoh's call from her. When Diana and Pharaoh finally talked, she assumed he was just there for a brief visit. But then Pharaoh surprised her by asking her to come with him to California. Overjoyed, Diana agreed. Diana's parents tried to intervene, worried about her relationship with someone they believed was just a driver. Diana reassured them, saying, "Don't worry, Pharaoh has already told you he doesn't intend to commit to marriage." At the airport, Pharaoh's real driver, Claude, was waiting for him with the car. Claude greeted Pharaoh as Mr. Olivetti, to which Pharaoh teasingly replied, "Claude." Diana, hearing this, was stunned. Once inside the car, Pharaoh finally revealed the truth. He was Pharaoh Olivetti, a billionaire. Diana couldn't believe her ears and began asking a flurry of questions. Pharaoh explained everything, including his father's last wish. He then took her to his luxurious bungalow while Diana admired the grandeur of the property. She also felt uneasy learning the truth about Pharaoh's identity. She told him she needed to return to New York soon to manage her agency. For the first time, Pharaoh opened up completely to Diana. He said, "With everything you had in New York, you made me your perfect partner. Now with everything I have, I want to make you mine. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Diana's eyes as she heard the words she had longed for. She embraced Pharaoh, overwhelmed with emotion. 6 months later, they had a grand wedding attended by many guests, including those who had selflessly helped Pharaoh during his time in New York. Among the attendees were Fred, who had become Pharaoh's mother's personal driver, and Angelo, the hot dog vendor who had fed Pharaoh during his lowest moment and had since become the owner of a successful Italian restaurant. Diana's office colleagues Curtis and even Peter joined the celebration. Together, Pharaoh and Diana embarked on their new life as husband and wife. And so friends, here the movie ends. So how did you like the story? Do tell us in the comments box, and for such movie explanation do subscribe to Movie Recap English. See you in the next movie. Till then, bye bye, take care.